In this episode, our guest is Ryan Dean, CEO of RD Content. A business focused on storytelling, this should be an interesting conversation with someone whose vision is to bring ideas to life. RD Content is London's fastest growing creative production agency, with international expansion high on the agenda. The business is an award-winning video content agency based in London, UAE, Singapore and New York. Spend time on their website and you will find yourself watching eye-catching content for clients such as Williams Formula One, Barber, Angry Birds, Qatar Airways, Google, Vodafone and many more. So Ryan, thank you for joining us on the podcast today. You started the business in 2009 in fairly humble surroundings. Just talk to our listeners a little bit around that first day when you walked in and you set up the business to where you are today.
Yeah, you're right. Well, firstly, thanks for having me on the show. You're right. We did start in fairly humble surroundings. Started in a bedroom in Clapham in South London. Prior to that, I'd been a journalist while I was at university. I'd always known I wanted to be in and around the world of video games and film and technology. And I'd ended up leaving uni and getting a job as a technology journalist.
Right.
Did that for about 6 months. And then I got met someone from the BBC who invited me to join a production company, go and work on a pilot as a presenter for a TV pilot about video games. And couple of years working there, I realized that I loved the filmmaking, video content creation world, and they've made me the head of viral videos, which at the time was sort of a fledgling idea around marketing. How do we use YouTube, but effectively mainly YouTube to share communications?
What would have been a viral video back then, Ryan?
Well. What would be a viral video? Well, I actually, you know what? I'll jump into the first one that we made for a client. So I got asked to pitch the NHS, and they were trying to promote a message about teenage pregnancy.
Okay.
So the video that we pitched is something that up to that point you'd never imagine the NHS would pay for. It was essentially shot on a mobile phone. It looked like a fight in a school playing field. So a bunch of kids, arms locked. Don't know if you remember the fights when you were at school, what they were like. Fight. The kids are running over. Kids filming, and when you get to the fight and they're in there, actually what you see is a girl on the ground. She's screaming, a young girl, maybe 13 years old. Camera moves around. Before you know it, you're down by her legs, and you see for a split second a baby's head emerging.
Wow.
And the camera cuts, and the video was released with no branding, nothing on it, on YouTube. It hit 1 million views in sort of 2 days. And then the NHS came out and said, yeah, we produced this to try and raise awareness around teenage pregnancy. It went everywhere. It was on Good Morning America. It was on BBC News. It was like this whole revolutionary idea. And viral then was people actively emailing and sharing the link, probably logging
forward. Yeah,
exactly, forwarding it on. So it was off the back of that, really, the business began. So the NHS came back to me and they said, we want you to do that again, but for sexual health. And we want you to do it, Ryan. We want you to do it. So go set up a company and we'll hire your company. And that's how I got the business started. And then the journey, really humble beginnings. It was me in a bedroom. I got this money paid into my account, which I remember seeing appear on the bank balance. And I was 22 or 23 years old and suddenly saw the amount of zeros in my bank balance being bigger than I'd ever seen before.
And before them or after them?
Yeah, before them. It was £15,000 was the budget. And I remember hitting my bank account and going, I'll never need another penny again. I'm essentially rich beyond my wildest dreams. I could do whatever I want. And obviously, as well as I do, that's sort of quite a foolish approach. The money ran out in 6 months and suddenly we were back to square one. And really, I got lucky in that I won a round the world project with about 5 days to go before I was going to throw it all in. I was really close to giving it all up. And I was sort of, calling family, calling friends, going, yeah, this hasn't worked out. It's not going to work. And then with 5 days left, literally me going, there's nothing left. Got a phone call and it was the Bacardi family saying we need a director and a producer to go around the world, literally all over the world, filming about the history of our brand, our cocktails. And I said, I have to just check.
I'll see if the diary lets me.
Let me just see if I can fit this in. anyway, that was not only an amazing moment and a lucky moment. And I think one of the things that your listeners, should hear from me certainly is luck is a huge part to play in growing any business. That was a lucky moment because it had come 2 weeks later. I'd have probably had to take another job and I'd have been out of it. And then when that money came in, I said, I'm doing this differently. I got myself an office in Shoreditch. I hired someone, and I said, we're going to take this super seriously. I went after clients way more aggressively. We quickly picked up Bentley, Aston Martin, Alfa Romeo in the car space, and we won a bunch of others. Slowly, the ball began to roll down the hill very slowly.
So Ryan, just touch on some of those sort of client wins then. At that stage, you've probably got, no disrespect, you've probably got no credentials in the back pocket. Obviously, you've worked on that content you spoke about the NHS, but how did you manage to sell your service into such esteemed brand names?
Yeah, so I went into the mistake I made in the first instance is I got that job and I stayed in my bedroom. The second time round, in my sort of second coming, I went into an office and I made sure that not a night went by, not a day went by without me going out talking to anyone and everyone in and around Shoreditch being a very creative space.
Of course.
And I said, this is what I do. I'm willing to come up with ideas for you. I've got great ideas. YouTube's really important. I think we should be doing more content on that channel. And I had a receptive audience as well. People were internally within these big organizations, marketing departments were going, I think we need to be doing something on YouTube. Do you know anyone who specializes in producing for that channel? Not the old producers, but like new people. So it was like the right idea at the right time, if that makes sense. And I had some open doors, and we did some pretty cool ideas. Like for Alfa Romeo, we pitched an idea of building their logo out of 3,000 water balloons, huge water balloons, took 3 days to build, and then drive a car in slow-mo, smashing all the water balloons, and then making it into an online game where if you chose the right water balloon that survived being hit in slow-mo, you'd win a car. So that kind of stuff. People, they would hear the idea and they go, can you pull this off for like 40 grand? And I said, yeah, we can pull it off. And then we go back in the other room and I go, start calling everyone I knew to go, how are we going to do this? Like, does anyone know how to blow up water balloons? And then the company slowly kind of got more consistent work. By 2012, after 3 years, I felt confident enough to hire someone full time on minimum wage, or possibly even just below minimum wage. But anyway, it was. So
you're still solo at this point, even though you've landed these mega contracts.
Yeah, because I was just outsourcing, freelancing, trying to get people in. But actually, my idea, my point of difference with the rest of the industry was around how can we do this in a way that isn't just a load of mercenary freelancers, where the individuals who are producing it are going for lunch in Soho House, have no real like base anywhere. They're just middlemen, right? I was like, how can we do this differently? So we took all the money, or I took all the money with my one employee or my two employees, right? And I said, we're going to invest a whole lot into equipment. We're going to get bigger facilities. We're going to start employing people. And so where others might have taken money off the table, I just plowed everything back in. And I did that for maybe the next six years, really, up to 2018. Just plowed in, return. And, the journey has been sort of just a very slow one, not like a typical growth company. It's been make profits, reinvest, and grow. And I think that's a kind of, it's become more fashionable lately, that idea versus, take loads of debt, spend it, irrespective of whether you make profits, just grow the top line. My view has always been, let's make sure we've got a solid bottom line, and then let the top line be grown organically. Let's not sort of pump up the numbers with loads of cheap money or whatever. And that means that your snowball doesn't grow so fast at the beginning as it comes down the hill, but as it goes, it gets faster and faster and faster. And so now we're well over 100 full timers. We have film studios, some of the best and largest film studios in London that we built ourselves, and we have offices around the world. So it's been a fun journey. I think the one critical key turning point that everyone might be interested in hearing is in 2014. Up to 2014, the vast majority of our revenue was driven by other ad agencies. So we go to a BBH or a Saatchi's and they'd say, well, we've got this client, LinkedIn or whoever it might be. We want you to white label and produce all the work for us, and we're going to look after the client. 100% of our revenue pretty much came from that way of winning. So we would be going around the ad agency saying, hey, can we kind of effectively do the work on your behalf? And in 2014, we decided we were going to go after our first major client direct for a retainer. and that was Williams Formula One. We're up against 9 other big agencies, and obviously we won it. I'm pleased to say we're still working for them now. And within, I'd say 6 months, every single agency, 100% of all of our revenue was gone from the ad agency world. Like all of it was gone. They all stopped working with us pretty much overnight. Once they realized we were talking to our two clients directly, once they saw that we had direct relationships, they all pretty much stopped working with us. And that was quite scary. But the business then began to grow, and it grew far, far better and far stronger after that. So that was sort of probably the really big turning point, I think, for the shape of the business as it is today.
Owning those relationships. Okay, so then help me a little bit then. So what's the sales pitch pre that then? So the sales pitch obviously to the ad agencies, etc., to the creatives, and how do you sort of position yourself as, the friendly guys that aren't going to take their breakfast? And then how does the pitch change then when you're talking to the actual corporates then in terms of saying actually why us?
So when we were talking to the ad agencies, we were saying, what are you doing currently? And they'd say, well, we're going to one of the big production companies. They got a big director. Everything is outsourced. You bring it all in. Our approach, even by 2014, was we already had edit suites in Covent Garden that we were invested in. We had already a team of around about 10 or 12 permanent editors and camera operators. So the pitch was, we can deliver you the same quality or even better quality, more dedication, more volume of work, but without the top line price of having a Ridley Scott attached to the job, right? And actually, more often than not, you don't need Ridley Scott because this isn't 1984 and we're not running like $100 million media campaign in cinemas globally, right? That's just not happening. Our content's being watched briefly, but so we need lots of it and we need to be able to create. So that was the pitch to the ad agencies, and they got it straight away. They're like, this is great. We're charging LinkedIn £500,000 and we pay you £50,000 and we make 450 and you do all the work, pretty much. This is like the best business.
Yeah, word of a sign.
So the pitch afterwards was go to the clients direct and say, the ad agency isn't really offering you loads of value here. Once you've got through the top level strategic thought of just do it for Nike, everything thereafter, you need a machine that can turn out the content, that has invested in the studios, invested in the post-production facilities, has the staff on payroll. They're not just a bunch of mercenary ghosts. You need them as a team. You need that type of business, and they're quite hard businesses to build. They take quite a long time to build, and the ad agencies are not best suited to do that because it's not really their world. And that has turned into being quite a well-received pitch. So most clients, when they hear about what we do, are really, really interested in inviting us in to talk through how we might deliver their workload for them versus going through their advertising agency.
Fascinating, thank you. So you touched on YouTube before, and that sort of leads us into social media, etc. So talk to us around how the social media landscape has changed, whether or not that's during your time, and how has that sort of given rise to what I describe as sort of the modern agency, as it were?
I think the overwhelming drive has been has changed from, I want to deliver a load of. Firstly, it started with like, make me something that can go on YouTube, right? Just because, isn't it amazing? In 2007, I can put whatever I want online. I don't have to wait for ITV or whoever. That quickly evolved into just get me loads of views. Views are the only metric that count. And then that evolved into get me engagements. And then that evolved into, turn us into a trend-setting, a trending campaign. Give us a trending campaign. We want to be the next whatever it is, whatever dance it might be or whatever. I think in terms of how things have really changed, the biggest single change has been the speed at which content moves through the system.
Okay.
So even sort of 2013, 2014, you could create a great piece of content. It would live primarily on YouTube as the place where people search, and they go to that. Now the overwhelming majority of video content consumed is on TikTok, Instagram Reels, obviously on YouTube as well, of course. But the speed at which consumption happens means that for brands in particular, it's as much about creating enough volume to maintain the algorithm's interest in your brand's position as it is about creating that one big amazing hit. if you see that amazing thing you've seen on TikTok, and then you swipe past it, and then you're trying to find it again. Like, trying to find it is like trying to find a needle in a haystack, right? It just doesn't. It's not how the platform is really geared up to work. It's just trying to keep your eyeballs addicted to the screen as you swipe through it. And as a producer for brands, you have to adapt how you work to accommodate that change in behavior. Of course, there's still the demand for YouTube, second biggest search engine in the world, and people use that to kind of work out how things work and want to see a product. But
so have you seen a shift in that? So TikTok, that fast burn through it, YouTube now becoming more of a dwell sort of platform where people are quite happy to spend however long, 5, 10, half an hour consuming content, whereas your TikTok, your Instagram, your Reels, for example, is very much a case of just 30 seconds, 15 seconds potentially.
Yeah, I think TikTok's a really interesting platform. It's not worked that well, I think, for many brands. I think a lot of brands, branded content on TikTok, the platform is designed to give you short, sharp dopamine hits through entertainment. And the entertainment will fall under funny, sexy, novel, and by novel I mean shocking, or it isn't, from a brand point of view, the brand really needs to often contort itself completely to try to have any relevance on TikTok. And I mean, I'm not up to date on their latest numbers, but I don't believe commercially it's proving anywhere near as big a hit as I think people might have expected it would.
It would make sense to me, that, yeah.
And that's because advertising always is a bit of an interruption, but as a platform, it's really overwhelmingly anti-advertising in many ways. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure this will change. Platforms mature and they change and they adapt. And ultimately, it won't exist if it can't be commercially viable, right? So at some point, they've got to make money one way or another, whether that's the Elon Musk subscriber pay a fee, or whether that's through advertising, which is obviously the tried and tested model. One way or another, it has to make money. I think YouTube, yeah, absolutely. We have no issue with our clients producing longer form content to live on YouTube, 100%. And people will go there and they will engage and they will sit, because they're seeking the content out more often than not. They're certainly when you're now the issue is YouTube, Meta, TikTok, that to a certain extent there's an effort to cannibalize each other's service, right? So YouTube are obviously putting huge amount behind their sort of rival version to TikTok, and Instagram effectively has completely copied it, which is obviously a tried and tested tactic from Zuckerberg. So and we haven't even mentioned Snapchat or really Twitter or LinkedIn or any other social platform, because I mean we could spend all day talking about it. So yeah, long and short of it is that we have a very different approach and strategic thinking for all of these platforms when it comes to our creative process. We have one central idea, and then spinning off of it all the different bits of content that might exist for each of those platforms.
Okay, thank you. When we first spoke, something that jumped out of the conversation that I had with you was that you're extremely passionate about the creative skills and filmmaking abilities of the UK. Just explain for our listeners and just repeat for me, what is it, in your opinion anyway, what is it about the UK that makes it such a strong place to work for creatives? Yeah,
I think we have a great cultural history of storytelling here in the UK in all forms of creative medium. So whether that's film, whether that's music, art, theatre, literature, we have a long legacy. I mean, going back to Chaucer or Shakespeare, right? It's ingrained in UK culture, and we have an outsized impact here in the UK to the rest of the world. And without turning this into a history lesson, who knows why our cultural impact, but almost certainly linked to the expansion of British Empire over all of those years, and the fact that the English language is preeminent globally. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is that we have one of the things the government has done right and done well over the years has been supporting the creative industries. They put some extremely good strategic tax breaks in place for the film, video games industry. And you see the ripple effect into the world of music videos, commercials, and other areas because of that. I think we're also geographically in a brilliant place. it doesn't take that long to get to the United States. We can get to Asia and Europe and the Middle East and Africa very quickly from London. It's extremely well connected. And so when you put all of those things together, and the legacy of creativity within London particularly, and the concentration of talent here, that's why you've got such an exciting place for the world of film and animation, television, and video games in particular.
Keep on London then. So your new offices, or the relatively new offices in London, have a big focus on sustainability. What was behind that drive, and additionally, how challenging was it when you decided to come up with a strategy of making or having such a sustainable office location and building? How easy was it to stay within those objectives?
I think you were referring to the film studios, right? Not
correct.
The
yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Film studios. Yeah.
So in 2020, we decided that building film studios, beginning of 2020, end of 2019, was the right thing for us. We're struggling to find film studio space to work in London. And this is all to do with the fact that Disney took a 10-year lease in Pinewood, Netflix 10-year lease in Shepperton. They wiped out loads of studio space. We couldn't find anywhere. So we set about finding the perfect location in London. We found it in 2021, and we took a lease on a site in Park Royal at the end of 2021. We set up a construction company with the idea and the objective to build not only the best sound stages in London for film and advertising and rehearsal spaces, but also the most sustainable. So our film studios are covered in solar panels. They have zero carbon energy throughout the entire site. We have water harvesting on site for all of the bathrooms and toilets. We have green initiatives in our gardens to promote insects and wildlife in the area. We have electric charging vehicles and many other things that make the studios stand out in the world of sustainability. And there's a couple of reasons. Firstly, because I'm passionate about it. I have young children. I want this planet to be here, not just for my children, but for my children's children, children's children, and so on. And it's clear that we're at a tipping point. If we don't do something about it now, then that might not be a future. There might not be a future for them. Clearly, we're not going to overnight all just stop using carbon, right? It's just not going to happen. But what we wanted to do is be an example of how a new idea of how a film studio could operate could exist. Many of the film studios are 100 plus years old. They are not built sustainably. They're full of asbestos. They're, and so on. So we wanted to be an example of what could be done. And, there's really strong commercial reasons for this as well. I think that's the thing that entrepreneurs need to think about is commercially, this is not just the right decision morally. This is the right decision commercially to do this. Government, my prediction is governments around the world are going to continue to ramp up pressure because of what voters want on all forms of business. And if those businesses do not adapt how they work in the spaces that they're operating in, then they will be cut out of contracts. The likes of BBC, Netflix, I do not believe those businesses will continue to operate out of facilities that do not meet certain standards in the coming years. So you can add that and apply that to any business you're in, any industry you're in. So it's the right decision to do it morally, even if it is costing you more on your bottom line. And it's also the right decision long-term commercially, in my opinion.
So you're thinking around that international aspect as well, and how you can impact that. You've got offices all over the globe. How do you find managing a fully international business, whether that's time zones, location? You might have different projects going on around the world. Just explain to us how you manage to keep that under control.
It's knackering. No, it's tiring. The first thing is like finding people you trust. If you want to grow an international business, you need to find people that you trust, and you need to empower those people to make decisions locally in their own time zone and be able to move quickly. That's what made this business good, and it's what will make those businesses great as well.
Okay.
I can't be everywhere all at once. I can't be on every time zone. So that's the critical factor, and that is not easy by any stretch. And that's how we run it. We empower the local teams to do what they do, and you pick great people and you say, go achieve these objectives and call me if there's a problem, and call me when it's successful.
Got it. Next question now, you will have to explain a little bit. So you've kind of given me permission to touch on this. So before COVID, you made the decision to bring external investors into the business, which as long as I'm not confused, with the first time that you would have done that. And so obviously bringing sophisticated, hopefully, investor to run the table. COVID then hits and your plans go on pause, which was not uncommon with many processes and businesses that were looking to raise capital at that particular point in time, as people either try to just get a handle on what that new world looked like, and also they had to concentrate on their own funds and portfolio businesses, etc. I'm quite interested to hear how you as a CEO went from deciding, right, I'm going to bring external investors into my baby, into something that I've grown, from the bedroom, to now, alongside me around the board table, to then something completely out of your control, COVID, putting a halt on that. So it wasn't anything that the business was doing good or bad. It was simply a macro thing that, obviously that we all went through, and then having to refocus on the business and then not be able to pursue that route. Just talk to us around that up and down trajectory of emotion and everything else that came with it, let alone trying to run the business. How did you cope with that, and how did you get to grips with, right, I'm going to bring an investor on, and then completely flip that and say, no, I'm going to stick with this path currently?
Yeah, we went through probably a very unusual experience in that we were less than 24 hours away from signing all the documentation. We'd completed all of the DD. We were doing a private equity deal, and COVID hit. And then when it came back around to complete the deal, we decided we didn't want to do it. After doing what is the best part of 9 months worth of work, to bring a deal like the size of our deal together. I mean, to answer your first question, why do it in the first place? I think in Britain, we're quite unique from a cultural point of view, from a business side of things, in that entrepreneurs are told quite often, you should you should de-risk. A friend was telling me about in Germany, if you go up to a successful business owner in Germany and you say to them, oh yeah, we're selling out some of our shares, the German owner will say, why, are you sick? Why would you do that? And I think in America as well, whilst not to say that, there aren't many Americans obviously raise investment and sell shares, they don't tend to cash out as early as perhaps UK entrepreneurs are advised to do.
Those advisors you're talking to, right?
Yeah. So I think we have a culture of being less risk averse. I think that's probably the safest way of doing it. And I think from my point of view, I just had some 2 children, and I was thinking maybe this is a good time to bring a partner in to help, also not just to de-risk as the sole shareholder, but to potentially help professionalize the business for that as we move into as a medium-sized enterprise. It's a very different world running a 20-person or 30-person business to running 100, 150, 200, 500-person business, or at least that was the perception that I had. And I think actually, we had great partners, we had lots of bidders, and it was a very exciting, interesting process to go through, quite stressful for anyone listening to this who's thinking about going through it. I'm sure they'd be aware of that, but it is a stressful, time-consuming process. And I think we did have great partners, and I think just it was a very unusual set of circumstances that everyone was faced with. When the dust had settled by the summer and the investors were keen to come back to the table to complete the deal, we decided not to do it. And we decided that for a number of reasons, but mostly I think because the life had moved on, and maybe our mentality had moved a little bit as well through that process. So it was a hugely educational thing to go through. You could spend a lot of money on an MBA and it wouldn't give you anywhere near that process of going through such a large deal that gets so close to completing. And I remain on good terms with all parties, which is great, and something you can't, it is at the end of the day just business. People are trying to do what's best for them, and you're trying to do what's best for you. And in our case, the business had grown quite a lot in those 3 months, so that made it challenging for the investor to go, oh wow, we've really missed the boat here. And so sometimes things just don't align. And that and these things happen. So
with the benefit of hindsight, albeit not of the ability of a crystal ball to try and figure out would it have been better, would it have been worse, how did your gut feel now in terms of difficult, isn't it? And I suppose you're going to go one way with the answer. But how, does it feel like it was the right thing to for the business to actually keep it within its current structure? Obviously, there's advantages to bringing an investor in, but just how do you feel sort of emotionally with it?
Well, I think obviously it's easier when the business has tripled in size in 2 years, right? So or tripled and, so it's obviously, if the business had gone off a cliff, then I'd obviously be sitting here, feeling like, but
that was the chance coin,
but I was always confident in the business, even going through it. I had that pang of, is this the right thing? I think one of the things that I'll be eternally grateful to that group of investors is the diligence they put us through was so extensive, right? It was to the nth degree. And we got tons of incredible information from that process about how the business was structured and ways
it's helped you look at the business in a different way, potentially.
I mean, of course, yeah. I mean, I had about 600 pages of DD to read through. So, everything from interviewing almost every member of the team, extensive interviews with every single client, prospective clients, all of our rivals. I mean, the full works in a way that no business owner would ever normally have. Structures around how we should build the board, and we implemented all of this. And you know what? For all the criticism that consultants get and sometimes PE gets, a lot of those suggestions we've implemented, and they were great, and they've obviously helped us carry on our journey. And so a massive gratitude on my side. And you know what, life is long in some sense, and you never know when you're going to come back around to those same people that you sat around the table with. So the best thing you can do if you're an entrepreneur, no matter how bad the situation is, you stand up, you shake hands, you brush yourself off, and you go, tomorrow is another day. I live to fight another day. And you never know, I might be sitting around this table with you guys doing the best deal ever in a couple of years. So that's the sort of approach I came away with for it.
That's good spirit. Talk to us about your leadership style. You're obviously a very passionate individual. You work in a creative space, so clearly that's going to be part of a personality trait for you. But go on, talk to us about your leadership style.
I think, I'm all about simple idea that I think all great leaders try, and I'm trying to emulate, is get great people, give them the ability to make decisions, let them be accountable for their actions, reward them well when success comes, and help to try and guide whenever you think something might be going wrong. I've got the people in my management team have all been with me for a long time on this journey. Most of them have been there for almost all of it, and they've grown up with the business. And when we brought new people in, you really need to bring people in who on personality are going to fit with that mantra of I'm happy to be responsible and be accountable. So, for example, someone who's sort of middle management inside of a great big 100,000 person, 200,000 person organization probably wouldn't enjoy the experience of working in this company. They would go, I'm kind of here to kind of keep things moving. I'm not here to be asked, how do I solve this really difficult problem? And I'm going to take it on my shoulders, right? So it's about finding people who want the right thing for them.
What's the future for the business? How do we touched on the fantastic clients that you've got. You've spoken about the growth that the business has gone on. You've looked at external investment. You've got an international footprint. You've got the studios. You're a well established, well known, well thought of brand. What's next for you in the business?
I think there's a couple of different things that we're doing. We obviously have the physical property business, the studios. We're going to expand that. We're going to take on more space. Want to be the leading operator of film studios in the UK, at least in the next decade. That starts from a very small base relative to other studios, but I think there's an opportunity there. I think the way that we're approaching studios is very different to the legacy studios out there. The way that we look after our producers when they come through the doors, the way that we think about the design of studio space, very different to other operators. And I think there's great potential there to go and grow that, not just in the UK, but around the world. We also have our agency business, the creative production agency, which continues to grow. Our objective there is to keep growing. We, in the branded content producers category, the top 50 in the UK, we've risen from I think ranked in the 40s a couple of years back to now third biggest. And the ambition there is to be the biggest, and also to continue to challenge the traditional ad agencies. You know, the WPPs. Even I would include Media Monks and others. You know, we go up against them regularly, and I'm pleased to say regularly beat them. So continue to beat them and grow. And then the next real exciting element will be our original content team. So we're making big investments into creating original content. We obviously own the studios. We have a very large team of people who are producers, editors, animators, directors. So it's a natural step for us to start creating original content, because we're vertically integrated in that we own
Any particular genre you think you'll go into first?
Yeah, we're looking at children's TV at the moment. So we've got some great government incentives there, and we've got great facilities to be able to pull it off. So that's a very exciting.
Is that because you've got some stakeholders at home that want to see it?
This is what happens when you've got 3 children under the age of 6.
Quite. You see the good and the bad, don't you, in terms of content?
Exactly.
both online and on television. No, thank you for that. That is a good insight into the future of the business. We always finish the podcast with 2 questions that give an insight into yourself. You've given us a good insight already, to be fair to you. First question: who is your icon? Any walk of life, that could be, you know, business, sports, family, whichever you decide. So who's your icon? And then what would you say to Ryan in 2009 when he's sitting in his bedroom thinking around that £15,000? He thinks he's made it then, to be fair, so it'd be difficult to see what you'd say to him. But what would you tell your younger self, sort of knowing what you know now and those ups and downs? So your icon, and Ryan in 2009.
I think from an icon point of view, story of Disney is really my is the one that I look to go, you know, it's just amazing. And I actually, obviously Walt Disney himself, but actually the guy who's had the biggest impact, I think, over the last 3 or 4 years in terms of the way of thinking is Bob Iger. I know he's obviously returned to Disney in the last few months, but I was introduced to Bob Iger through his book, Ride of a Lifetime, which I think 2019 maybe, or 2020. So
you mentioned the book. It's good, isn't it? Yeah.
It's a phenomenal book, and it got me to read. Obviously, I love Disney as well, like Disney, and so reading about his approach as a leader, his vision, how he turned around Disney, you know, from a pretty poor position to where it is today. Obviously, he's coming back. So they always say, you know, never go back. They say that about football managers, don't they? But we'll see how that goes. But I think his story as an iconic business leader and a visionary. If you haven't read about him and you haven't looked him up, he's someone I'd really admire and I think is worth your time to look up. I think, talking to 2009 Ryan and say, well, 15 grand won't last that long, especially when you've got to make a film with it. I think it would be trust your instincts. I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I haven't had loads of periods of like major doubt. You know, I haven't got that story of, oh God, I had imposter syndrome and I didn't know what I was doing. But, you know, there have been moments where you're going, I'm going to throw the towel in, like when the money was running out.
5 days off you.
Yeah. So I think it's, you know, trust your instincts, go for it. You're doing a job that you are extremely lucky to do. You make pretty pictures come to life. It's basically the job you dreamed of doing your entire childhood. You've always wanted to run a business as well. So you basically fuse together storytelling, making pictures come to life into a highly enjoyable living. And, you know, you're going to spend the overwhelming majority of your life working, right? The overwhelming majority of your heartbeats are going to be spent doing some kind of job. So, and for the vast majority of people, they don't get to necessarily do something. Those heartbeats aren't always spent doing something they love with a massive passion. So I'm extremely grateful for that. And I think, you know, yeah, that would be it's that message. It's just like you're going to have a great time. You're going to enjoy it. You're very lucky. Be grateful, be gracious. And just enjoy every second of it, because it goes by very quickly.
It's interesting that we did one recently, one of these podcasts, and the CEO that we spoke to, you know, his answer to that was something along the lines of, you know, when you're 60, don't have the rain going down the back of your neck, thinking around what you could have done or not enjoying in your life. So the feedback to younger Ryan would have been, that 15 grand's going to go pretty quickly, son. And for God's sake, don't ignore that Bacardi email or that Bacardi phone call. Just for God's sake, pick that one up.
Yeah, make sure that you answer that phone call for the Bacardi job, because you're going to have an awesome time the next 14. No, it's not been all ups. There's ups and downs, right? But it's more ups and downs. Enjoy it. Enjoy every second.
Top man. Ryan, that was it. You've survived. Thank you very much for talking to us on the Founder in Chief podcast.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for having me again, Paul. And we'll catch up very soon.
This content is issued by Zeus Capital Limited, which is authorised and regulated in the United Kingdom by the Financial Conduct Authority for designated investment business and is a member firm of the London Stock Exchange. Nothing in this podcast should be viewed as investment advice. Listeners should consult an investment professional before making any decisions regarding topics mentioned in this podcast. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and not of Zeus. Please note that participants